All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Liz here with the Satin Ice team, and we are so excited because today we're going to be making Christmas cookies. And this is like the best time of year to kind of, if you are trying to brush up on baking or haven't baked in a while, or even if you bake often, hopefully you'll learn some new tips today. Cookies are definitely the highlight of the holiday, so hopefully today we can make some cookies that you'll be able to enjoy in the next few weeks. Um, all right, so let's begin. I'm just gonna turn this over to my workspace. And here are the cookies that we're gonna be working on today. You'll see there's some gingerbread, men, trees, and presents. Now, feel free to use whatever type of shapes you want. So if you already made these, totally fine, you can follow along. But if you wanted to do other things like wreaths or reindeer, Santa, we'll be using like similar techniques. You might need a few more colors, but go ahead and kind of put your own spin to this. Now, today we're going to be using Satin Ice Royal Icing, and this is available at Michael's. It's ready to use, and that's the best part about this. The beauty is you just open it and start using it. You don't need a mixer, which most, if you make it from scratch, you're going to need. But with this, you're ready to go. And then we're also going to be coloring it with Satin Ice food color gels. Now, you want to make sure when you're working with royal icing that you have these water-based food colors. If you're using like oil-based candy colors, those will actually break the royal icing because there's oil in it. So you want to make sure that it's the water-based food color gels. All right, so we have red, green, and brown that we're working with today, and that's going to create our cookie color palette. But again, if you want to add in some other colors like blues and yellows, feel free to. This is just a sample that we're going to be demonstrating. All right, so you'll see that a few techniques that I'm going to be using in this class are we're going to be kind of coating it with a thinned out or a thick royal. That we put a little water into to get it to a consistency where we could spread it. And then we're going to be using a slightly thicker consistency to create these accents, like these dots and these ribbons and such. And the reason why we're doing this is because it dries really quick, like having this really thin layer of icing. You can see here that it's almost just like a glaze rather than like a thick, piped on and flooded frosting. So we'll just be applying a thin layer, and that'll give us a cookie that'll dry fast. So not only for the purposes of this class and the time that we have within the hour, but also when you're at home and you're doing this with kids and stuff, you might not want to wait overnight for your base layer to dry. You might just want it to be ready in a few minutes. So having this thin layer will be really helpful when you're wanting to kind of get the activity going along without waiting for things to dry. All right, so let's get started. I'm going to move these over to the side and I will start with coloring the royal icing. So go ahead and grab your royal icing, your food colors, as well as some small bowls or cups if you have, and something to mix it with. So here I have my spatula, and while I move these out of the way, go ahead and get your stuff prepped. Okay, so here I have two, just in case I run out, but they're the exact same. And if you had just bought your royal icing and haven't opened it yet, you might notice that the consistency on the top is a bit like stiff, and then there's liquid on the bottom. It kind of just separates as it sits, but that's not an issue at all because that's kind of just how it is. You just want to give it a good mix. So you could see here, it doesn't look super smooth, but once you mix it, you'll get a consistency that's much smoother. All right, so you just want to make sure that you're getting the bottom and sides as well. So go ahead and do that. Let me fix this a little bit. Okay, great. And you'll notice that as we start to mix, you start getting a much nicer consistency. So this is pretty thick, but say you wanted something thicker, you can always add a little bit of powdered sugar. But this is a really great base that we can start making like looser like frosting with. So we just need to add water to that. But go ahead and once you have that all mixed up, we're gonna grab our bowls. Right, so hopefully you have something smooth like that. And to begin, I'm just gonna grab 3 bowls. And I'm going to add a little bit of royal icing to each one. Oops. Okay. And royal icing actually goes quite a long way, so you don't need too much. And then the last cup here. Okay, so once you have these ready, make sure to close the tub of open royal icing because as it sits and hits air, it does dry and harden. So you want to make sure that you keep this as, covered as possible so that we don't get uh, royal icing drying on us. Okay. And now let's go ahead and color. So you can start with whichever one you want, but I'm going to start here with red. And just go ahead and open up your food gels and add maybe 2 drops of red. So it's always better to color things modestly first because once you get it too deep of a color, it's hard to make it light again. But if you go from a light color, it's always easier to keep adding. So make sure you add little at a time. Wow, that is a beautiful, beautiful red. So you want to scrape your spatula to make sure all the white icing from there is off too. Okay, we can continue mixing. Again, making sure you scrape the sides and bottom. And you'll see just 2 drops of that red gave us this really vibrant royal icing. So you don't need to use too much. All right, and I'm going to set this aside for a second. But again, because I don't want it to dry too much, I'm just going to grab a wet paper towel and just kind of keep this covered while I move on to my next one. Okay, so we're going to wipe off our spatula, or if you have another one on hand, you can grab another clean one. You just want to make sure that none of the red is on here, or else it will kind of muddy up our other colors. All right, so next, let's go ahead and move on to green. So let's go ahead and try 2 drops of this as well. And if we want it darker, we can add a little bit more, but I think this will be good. All right, nice and vibrant, beautiful color. Again, if you wanted a little bit more darker, you can add in more, but this is good for what we're going to use. All right, so this also, you want to cover it, keep it covered. All right, and now onto our last base color. It's going to be the gingerbread man. So you want this one to be pretty light, and you can kind of tell from these other ones that the saturation of these food colors are really strong. So what I'm going to do is instead of dropping one whole droplet into there, just because I don't know how strong it'll be, and I really want a light green, a light brown, I'm just going to grab a tiny bit here first because 1 drop might be too much. So again, let's try a small amount first and then add more as we need. Okay, so it's light, kind of ivoryish color, so let's add in a little bit more. All right, it's getting a little bit deeper, and make sure that you get the bottom because a lot of food coloring can be kind of stuck under there. All right, so I'm going to add a tiny bit more. And hopefully that'll give us a nice light brown. All right, that looks really, really good. Looks like a delicious gingerbread color. So I'm going to use that for our gingerbread man. And then we will be making this much darker to get the dark brown for eyes and mouth over here for the accents. But for now, we'll just keep it this color. All right, so I'm gonna put this under my moist towel again and just kind of get ready for the next step. So I can get these food colors out of the way for now. Again, we'll be revisiting with the dark brown later, but just kind of prepping your space really helps keep things clean while you're working, and especially with cookies and royal icing, it can get a little messy. So we want to kind of prep our space for the next step. Okay, we have our colors here, and now I'm going to bring in my cookies. So go ahead and grab the shapes that you prepared. And I have 4 of them here, and you can start with whichever one you want, but I think I'll start with the squares just to show you the first technique because it'll be easiest with things that don't have like irregular shapes. So let's go ahead and grab the red. And this is, again, the texture straight out of the container. So if you want to get it a little bit thinner, you can. But for me, when we're doing this first coat, you don't want it too runny because the more runny it is, the longer it'll take to dry. So I have this consistency. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start spreading it on the cookie. And having this drier icing will allow us to have a quicker dry time. So I'm just going to go all the way towards the ends. And feel free to even let it go a little beyond the edge, and then we can clean it up later. But for now, just spread it as evenly as you can. And one more side. Okay, and you can see that I'm going a little bit past the edge. Kind of like if you are familiar with cake decorating, it's when you do the top, you want to push that buttercream over the edge so that you can clean it up better than if you just kind of use your knife from the top. So we'll be cleaning it from the side. So try to just get it as even as possible. And then once you have a thin layer of icing like that, now I'm gonna clean this off. And with a clean spatula, I'm just gonna go over it and try to get it as smooth as I can. Go back and forth. And you'll notice a little bit with this thicker icing, but even with the thinner icing, it's more apparent that it almost has like a self-healing property that like more liquid it is. So you'll notice that as you smooth it out, the lines get a little bit blurred. All right, and then here is where I'm talking about where the overhang of the royal icing kind of helps us. So now that we have this kind of coming beyond the cookie, we can take our icing spatula and just kind of run it across like that. That'll take off the excess frosting. So hold the cookie in one hand and then your angled spatula, and you kind of want to move downward. So we're not spreading it, we're kind of going perpendicular to the cookie, kind of cutting off or shaving off that extra frosting. Okay, let's go ahead and do that with this side as well. Okay, and then see how you have like a nice clean edge. All right, so there's our first one. And let's go ahead and do another one just for practice, and then we can move on to the other shapes. So grab some more royal icing. Place it right in the center, and then start spreading. And you certainly can use this ready-to-use royal icing to pipe a border and flood inside. Again, if you are just joining us, we're doing this spreading technique so that we can have a faster dry time. Because if you do outline and flood, you will have to wait a couple hours to overnight for that flood layer to dry. But if you're just looking for a really quick activity to do that's easy and doesn't require too much wait time or work, this is a really good method to kind of just get decorating right away. All right, so we have the royal icing, and again, we're pushing it all the way to the sides. And feel free to maneuver your cookie however you need to, just so that you can access all the areas that you need and get a smooth coat. And don't worry, like, don't stress out too much about getting everything super, super smooth. Just remember that part of making cookies is, having fun. So it doesn't, especially if you're doing this with a big group or something, you just want to create the memory. So if you want super smooth tops, then the flooding, outlining and flooding will give you that kind of look. This is, just a really basic way to decorate a cookie. It's quick, easy, and fun. Okay, now that I have the top glazed, again, take my offset spatula and hold it perpendicular to the cookie and kind of cut off the rest that's hanging on that top, and then spin it around. Do the same here. Okay, spin it around. Same thing. And you can see why the square is much easier than the other shapes, but the other ones are fairly easy too, so don't worry too much. All right, so we have our second cookie that has been glazed. So you'll see that the layer is pretty thin, so that'll allow us to pipe our accents on pretty soon. All right, and now with the rest of your royal icing, if you are done with your squares, go ahead and save that because we're going to be creating a looser frosting, well, slightly looser to pipe on details. So keep that covered because we don't want it to dry out. So I'm going to do that and leave it over to the side. And then grab your spatula, clean that off if you need to, or grab another one, and we'll move on to the next color. And if you have any questions while we're doing this, please feel free to ask. We have Amy and Emily on the line here from Satin Ice, and they can send over your questions to me if you want them answered right away, or if it's something that they can answer, they will also get back to you. Like if it's a link that you need or something, they can post that in the group chat too. All right, so next let's move on to our gingerbread man. Okay, so we have this light brown and just do the same thing, grab a bunch of frosting or royal icing and place it on your gingerbread man. A little bit more. Push the icing all the way to the edge and over. And let's get his feet here. And just a little bit more. Perfect.
Hey Liz, we have a question from Nikki. She's asking, is satin ice frosting vegetarian or vegan?
Oh, that's a good question. Let me see if it's on on here. It does contain eggs. So yes, it contains eggs. I don't know if that I'm not maybe I'm not 100% sure the difference between vegan and vegetarian, but um I'm guessing it doesn't qualify for one of those. Yeah, doesn't qualify for vegan probably. All right. So again, we have our icing. Try to get it as smooth as possible. And for this one, I'm gonna try to just make sure that the smooth part is the face because we will be putting um, eyes and nose, and we don't want it to look like there's wrinkles in his face. All right, so I'm gonna make that as smooth as possible. Okay, so now that I have this coated, I'm gonna go ahead and now kind of go over the sides. So again, angle my brush and kind of follow the line of the cookie. Just kind of scrape the edge, and then you'll get um, clean lines there. All right, let's go from here. Try to wipe off any excess frosting or icing that you have back into your cup, because you can use that again. And try to hold your cookie the best as possible without spreading it too much. All right, so again, follow the lines of the cookie.
Hi, Liz, you have another question.
Yeah, sure.
Someone's wondering what type of cookie you're using and what type of cookie you're working with.
Oh, I'm just using a basic sugar cookie. So there's I can I can give you the link. Um, let me just finish this cookie real quick. But yeah, there's so many recipes for sugar cookies, and you could find your preference. But you can, one person, a blogger who has a really good sugar cookie recipe, it's Cooking with Carly. And she has this sugar cookie recipe that like millions of people have made, and it's a really good one. The one I'm using is just a tiny bit different because I added a little bit of cake flour instead of using all-purpose flour, just to make the cookie a little bit more tender. So if you want a softer bite cookie, using cake flour or adding cornstarch to a recipe like that, like it's a very basic recipe. There's not too much variation with sugar cookies, but yeah, if you want to do that. And then this one, I also added vanilla extract as well as almond extract. So a lot of people just use the vanilla, but I think adding the almond gives it kind of a more interesting flavor. So yeah, I did that. But you can add whatever flavoring you want to your sugar cookies as well. All right, so I'm done with the brown, and I'm going to cover that up because we don't want that to get dry, and we'll bring in the green.
One more question, Liz. Is a sugar cookie or a butter cookie best?
I mean, I'm just using a sugar cookie. It has butter in it. You can use different types of cookies. Like you can use shortbread for this as well. So really, like you can use chocolate cookies, like really anything will work really well for this. So it'll keep well. It won't dry out uh, too fast. And once you package these, if you package them in like an airtight bag, then they will actually keep for like months because the icing will harden and you'll be able to bag them. And then, yeah, they'll keep for a very long time. It's not as quickly perishable as like a cake or a brownie would be. So you'll be surprised. Because I know a lot of people, like I've given cookies to quite a few people, and some of them, they're like, oh, like, especially if it's decorated, they're like, oh, this is too pretty to eat. Like, I'm just gonna keep it. Like, I'm like, no, eat it, it's food. But just because of the pure aesthetics of whatever decorated cookie you're making, some people might just want to keep it as like a memento for a while before they decide to eat it, which is totally fine. These will last quite a while. So, all right, for the cookie, for the tree, make sure you get the bottom too. Okay, and now that I have the base of this cookie covered, I'm gonna go ahead and scrape off excess frost or excess icing to make it as smooth as possible. I keep saying frosting because I usually work a lot with buttercream, but you know what I'm trying to say. Royal icing. All right. So we're gonna get this smooth as possible. And especially with the tree, it's okay if it has a little bit of texture because it's a tree. So if you want to call it kind of follow the lines of how a tree would slope down like this, you can. And if you're making a lot of cookies, for instance, like if you're going to make like 50 of the same cookies, you could also just, instead of icing each one, because that would take a really long time, you could place this royal icing in a larger bowl and add a little bit of water to it to thin it out. And you could just dip your cookies. Again, that is a more watery, looser consistency of royal. So it'll take a little bit, a little bit of time to dry. But especially if it's thin, then, it shouldn't take that long. Again, not as long as doing a flooded cookie. All right, so now I'm going to go around the edges of the cookie and start to clean up that royal icing, scraping each time so that we don't add more royal icing where we don't want it.
Liz, how
Mm-hmm.
much cornstarch would you add to make the royal icing softer?
Cornstarch, or so to make the icing like looser, I would use just water. If you use something like powdery, like cornstarch or um, like powdered sugar, it'll make your royal icing thicker.
Just to clarify, it's actually to make the cookie softer.
Oh, cookie softer. Okay. So usually if you kind of want to substitute like a cup of all-purpose flour for a cup of cake flour, you can remove 2 tablespoons of the all-purpose flour and substitute that with the cornstarch. And that'll kind of give you a homemade cake flour. So yeah, you can follow that. So 2 tablespoons per cup of all-purpose flour. Remove the 2 tablespoons and add the cornstarch. That'll give you a softer cookie. Okay, so this is good. Oh, I totally just knocked into the gingerbread, which is fine because we can just kind of fix it up. We can patch it up with the brown. So if that happens, don't panic. Don't like stress out about it. Again, we're having fun with our cookies, so just cover it up. And if you need, like, if you have like a really big accident with your cookies, there's always sprinkles. You can just sprinkle over it and it'll make it look like it was there on purpose. All right, so we have our basic shapes down. So we have the gingerbread, the tree, and our gift boxes. And now what we're going to do is we're going to place our royal icing into piping bags so that we could pipe on decorations. So actually, let me just move all these shapes out for a second. And then we can grab our water as well as the 3 different colors that we have and our brown food coloring. So here is the brown. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to thin these out just a tiny bit so that when we pipe them, they don't peak so much. So like if you use this stiff icing and pipe dots, they'll like poke up straight. And we really want it to be a little bit softer. So we don't need to add too much water, but we just want to do a little. So you'll see, you'll kind of have to feel it. But you see, I just added like 3 tiny drops to this. And I'm just going to mix it until I feel like I have a smoother consistency. So as I pull it, you can see that now it's a little bit smoother, looser, and stretchier. Okay, so that'll be good. Now, if it's too runny, like the lines won't be so sharp. They'll kind of like fall over. So we just want to make sure that we have something that still holds its shape fairly well. All right, so I'm going to add this to a piping bag. So let me grab a piping bag real quick. And I just have these tipless piping bags. They're super thin and they're made, a lot of cookiers use them with royal icing. So if you've never used a piping bag before, I'm just going to grab it and cup over the top until I have my hand in the shape of a C and the bag is open. And now I can go grab my royal icing.
Liz, how much
Mhm.
cake flour do you add to make a cookie softer?
Well, so like this one, I've, played around with it quite a lot, but if you use cake flour for the entire substitution of all-purpose flour in most recipes, it will be really soft and like when you eat it, it will kind of like melt in your mouth. Um, and I would say maybe try not to make it too soft, because you still want a little bit of a snap. So if you substitute like half the all-purpose flour in a recipe, or even in the recipe that I mentioned, and just replace half of it with cake flour, it'll give you just a softer bite. And also, if you want royal icing with a softer bite, you can add a little bit of glucose, which Satin Ice also does have, and that'll make your icing not only shinier, but it'll make it softer. So when you bite into it, it doesn't like crack. Yeah, it's just a really nice texture to have. Okay, so I'm going to take this, push all the icing down, and I like to just whirl it like this, like a helicopter, if that kind of just moves everything down. Okay, and you're not going to need too much icing, so this is fine, but if you need more, or if you have more, that's good too. All right, and now we have, let's move on to our red. And for this one, I'm going to grab another bag. Oh, and so just leave this. Oh, we're going to cut the tips of it later. So just leave it kind of to the side. And then let's move on to our red. Again, open up. Like this. And I can also show you, like, if you are bagging up a lot of colors, it's also helpful to just have like a really, like a small, tall, like narrow cup. Nothing that's too wide or else the bag won't fit over it. And you can just place your bag into the cup like this. And it'll just give you like a hands-free way to transfer your royal icing, buttercream, whatever you're working with. Anytime you're filling like a pastry cream, anytime you're filling a piping bag, you can use this technique. And it'll just make things a little bit easier.
Liz, you mentioned where to find the recipe earlier. I just want to share a link because a few people were asking, can you share the site again and I'll send a link out?
Yeah, it's Cooking with Carly. I feel like it might be with a K, but yeah, sorry, I can't Google it right now, but if you can kind of look that up, it's Cooking with Carly. It's either a C or a K, but I have a feeling it might be K.
Great.
Okay, same thing with this one. Let's whirl it so all oh, it's down. Did you guys find it? I think some people are putting it on the chat. So hopefully you guys got it. It's a really good recipe. Again, I usually take recipes and I tweak them myself and experiment with them, like adding the cake flour, the almond extract. And even a lot of people forget to, like in cookie recipes, they don't put salt in it, but I always think a little bit of salt helps. So it kind of balances out all the sweetness because you have icing as well as the cookie. So I would always add just a tiny pinch of salt to any baking recipe that I have. All right, we're going to change this light brown into dark brown. So I'm going to add a few drops of this brown food coloring. Again, it's a water-based gel food color. And now you can see by darkening it, we have a whole completely different color than the light brown that we were using. So you really don't need like a lot of different gels. You can always kind of create different colors by adjusting the saturation. All right, so now wow, this looks so chocolatey and delicious. We're gonna put that into a piping bag as well. Okay. And this one, this dark brown, you only really need a little because we're only going to be piping the eyes and the mouth with it. So if you don't have too much, totally fine. Place it in the bag. Pull this up. Push everything down. Again, give it a whirl. And if there's like a large air bubble like trapped inside your piping bag, just go ahead and like lay it down on your table and try to squeeze out that air bubble because while you're piping, it might burst in like if the air bubble travels down, this part might burst while you're piping. You want to make sure that you get all the air bubbles out as much as possible. So it's not like a professional term, but I call it burping the bag. Just try to get all the air out. All right. So we have our bags of frosting or icing here that we're going to be doing our details with. So we can go ahead and clean up like all these cups and bowls that you have and bring in your cookies again so we have room for that. Oh, and one thing before we do, just gonna grab my scissors. And for these details, you can decide if you want them super thin or super thick, but I'm just gonna cut just a tiny bit. Just like the food coloring, it's always best to go modest first because you could always cut more or add more food coloring. Always try to like do the minimum possible and then test it out. And if you don't want, you can cut more. But if you cut too much to begin with, then you're gonna have to grab a new piping bag. So it's always better to just cut a little, test it out, and then proceed from there. All right, so I'm kind of typing a sample here of how thick it will be. And I think I like that. If you want it a little bit thicker, again, cut your bag a tiny bit more. But for me, I'm just going to be cutting just the tip so you see how small that cut was. And I'll test this one out for you too.
Liz, if you add glucose syrup to soften and shine the royal icing, how much do you add? Is it just a drop by the drop or a teaspoon or what would you do?
Well, I guess that depends on what quantity you're starting with. Like for instance, if you wanted to like add some to here, like I would don't add like too much, but don't add too little. Um, Maybe to this amount, I think when it's in the container, it's like this much full. Maybe I would add like a tablespoon, or even up to 2 tablespoons, but you can see that like it's not like a huge ratio. So yeah, but if you're making it from scratch and you have like a big bowl, like a KitchenAid bowl full of royal icing, then maybe you might be adding like a fourth or maybe like a third of a cup, or actually more like a fourth of a cup. So a couple tablespoons to the entire batch. But yeah, not too much, but because it could ruin the structure of your royal icing, so you just want to add a little. Okay. And here's my green. Okay, I want the green to be just a little thicker. So I'm going to cut a bit more. Okay. All right, so now we have all our piping bags ready. And what I'm going to do is just clean this off so it doesn't get on our cookie. Oh, and I have another tip that I wanted to share. So when we had our cookies, you notice that it's pretty flat, and when you bake them, they could puff up in the center. So as soon as they come out of the oven, like while they're still on the tray, you just want to take something flat like a fondant smoother and just give it a gentle press, and that'll make sure that your cookie surface is flat, so that when you're making like royal icing cookies, especially if you're flooding them with loose icing, they don't start dripping off the sides because of the dome. You really want to start with a flat cookie so that your icing will stay flat on it as well. All right, so hope that helps. And then especially if you're doing like a whole tray, you can just add another tray on top and kind of just press it with that too. But I do like going individually one by one and flattening them out with this. All right. And that'll also resolve any large like bubbles you might have in your cookie too. All right, so let's go ahead and start with the present. So you can use, again, whatever color you want. I'm just going to be using the green for this one. And just to start, I'm going to begin in the center of one, drag it all the way to the end, and stop there. And I want to show you, hopefully I can get the angle of this. So you don't want to kind of scrape the cookie. You really want to touch down and hold the bag higher. So you're just kind of stretching that royal icing across. So you're not ruining any of the royal icing under. All right, and if something like that breaks, you can always just connect them back. And after a few minutes, again, like especially if your royal icing is soft, these two lines will kind of merge together again. Again, it's like a little self-healing of a frosting. Okay, so now we're gonna do the bows. So I'm gonna I'm gonna draw a loop here and then end with a line. So I'm just doing that all in one continuous motion. Okay, let's do this side as well.
Liz, when you flatten the cookies, do you ever experience breaking them, or is that a concern?
Oh no, I mean, because you're not like pressing down on them. You're really just like gently taking this and, just gently pushing them down. Don't press too much or else, yeah, while the cookie's still warm, it could kind of break. But I've never had a cookie break on me. Just because you'll be able to know when you feel like it's losing its structure. You just really want to run it past it pretty lightly. But yeah, it'll still because the cookie's warm, that's why that dome is going to settle down even with a gentle press. Okay. All right, so here is our gift box. Now we're going to finish it with a little bit of, maybe we'll finish it with a little bit of red in the center. Or you can also get like a large sprinkle and put it in the center as well. Like a gold sprinkle would be really cute. But this is good, especially if you want to minimize the different types of things you're working with. Like if you don't want to bring out sprinkles and you don't want to make a bunch of different colors, again, you can create a beautiful set with just 3 colors. All right, so let's go ahead and these two will need green.
Can you
And
freeze the cookies once you've baked them to use for later?
Oh yeah, of course. You can freeze these for months and months. The cookies will keep really well. I prefer to keep the undergraded cookies frozen. You could also just cut out the dough if you want to bake them fresh later, and freeze the cut out dough, or sheets of dough. Totally fine. I just prefer not to freeze already iced cookies. So as long as they're not iced, I think you can freeze them, but I always just worry about condensation because once you bring them out of the freezer, and they hit like a warm room temperature, they might form condensation, which might lead to bleeding in your colors or even like a little melting in your icing. So it's best if you can decorate, like if you need to decorate later, just freeze either your sheets of dough or your cutout cookies, baked or unbaked. Either way is fine. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and trace this cookie. I'm going to put a few little scallops and you'll notice I'm going to go section by section just to give it a little bit more character. And you'll notice when you do like the outlining with the royal icing, it also kind of helps clean up any of the jagged edges that you have. I'll cover those up. Okay, so you can make the scallops or not, up to you. I just feel like they're a little cute. Okay, slightly larger scallops on the bottom, going all the way up. Again, don't trace on the cookie. You want to lift your piping bag just slightly up. So instead of like dragging like this, it gives you kind of like a chunky line. If you touch down, lift it up and pull the icing, it'll give you a much smoother line. All right, so we have this decorated right here, and I'm gonna finish this one as well because this one needs a little bit of green. And you'll notice, see, we just had like such a tiny bit of icing, but since we're just doing accents with it, you really don't need too much. A little goes a long way. But if you have extra royal icing, you can just freeze this. You can freeze it in the bag. And then when you want to defrost it, you can kind of massage it after it comes back to room temperature, just in case anything separated. Like in the beginning, I showed you like straight out of the tub, it separates a little. So if you freeze this, well, I would knot it first. Just tie a knot so that it doesn't come out and it doesn't dry. You could freeze this, defrost it, and reuse it again. So you don't have to waste any icing at all. Okay.
Liz,
Mm-hmm.
can you use royal icing and gel colors on a cake?
Uh, no. I wouldn't use royal icing on a cake, especially like if it has a layer of buttercream coated on it, because the royal icing has like a lot more liquid and it could melt. So I wouldn't use royal icing directly on the cake, and it dries hard again. So once the royal icing is dried, it'll be cracky. You could see like even like little pieces are falling off. So if you put that on a cake that's really moist, the textures will be really kind of maybe strange together. So I wouldn't put royal icing on a cake, but you could put decorated royal icing cookies on a cake. Like if you just wanted to coat a cake and place a few of these cookies on the side or on the top, you could totally do that, because you have the cookie kind of as a barrier between the cake, the buttercream, and the royal icing. All right, so for this one, I'm just gonna pipe a few dots of red all around. And again, if you wanted to do something else, like if you wanted to do snowflakes on here, or you wanted to go all out and put garland and stuff like that, you definitely can. I'm just doing dots because it's, simple and cute, but feel free to decorate it however you want. Just try to space them as best as you can. All right, just a few more going here. Right. And I also had you, in the tool list, supply list, I also had you bring in a toothpick or a scribe. Now, these are really helpful when you're flooding cookies, but they can also be helpful in instances like this. Say, for instance, if you feel like one of your dots has gone awry, like this one, it's kind of slanted to the side, you could just take your toothpick and just fix it like that, and you won't even know. And especially if like some of them have too high of peaks, you could also just push it down with your toothpick or your scribe, and that'll make it much cleaner. Okay, and our last one is the gingerbread man. So we have him here. I'm gonna put some dots and squigglies on him. So on the arms, I'm just gonna go back and forth with the red and create like little ribbon here. And on the bottom, I'll use the green. Right, and this way as well. Okay, and I do want to put some buttons on him, so I'll place a green one. So if you want your like accents to be bigger, just hold it in place. So instead of doing a drop like that, you just want to hold it in place and keep squeezing to build up so you get a much larger dot. So even with this small little opening, you can create different sizes. Okay, and then we'll grab our red, do a button up there and down here. Make this one a little bigger. Right, and last thing we have is our smiley face. So here is my dark brown. Again, I just want to make sure that it pipes out smoothly, because if this was the last one we did, so it could have dried, like the frosting that's by the opening could dry. So before you go and pipe on a cookie itself, always pipe kind of on the side, like on a plate or a paper towel or whatever, just so you can make sure that there's no dried royal icing stuck there. Okay, so I'm just gonna pipe two little eyes and a big smile. And I'm just going to take my time. You see how slowly I'm going, just so that stream of royal icing doesn't break. Now, maybe I'll add little ends to his mouth. Super cute. All right, so, oh, let me just do a little bit of the bark on the bottom of the tree. I'll just go back and forth with this dark brown. Just kind of cover that up, just so it has a bit more contrast. All right, so we have our cookies here. Super cute, super easy. Like these came together so quickly, and they're almost like you can just set them for like 10 more minutes and they'll probably by then it'll dry completely. So you don't have to worry about waiting. You can actually, as soon as it dries, you can just eat it. So it's a very quick activity. very fun and easy. Definitely something that would be perfect to do with your kids. And if you have any more questions, go ahead and leave them here. We'll leave the chat on just for like 30 more seconds to a minute if you guys have any questions. Hope you guys try this out if you were just watching today, but if you were doing it along with me, hope you enjoy the cookies that you just made. And these make wonderful gifts. So again, you can just decorate them, put them in a plastic bag, tie them off, and they'll keep for quite a while. Right. Oh, yeah. And you can view the recording as well. It will be up tomorrow, I believe, on the Michaels YouTube. So if you missed anything or needed to kind of slow down and rewatch something, you could always visit the Michaels YouTube channel. All right. Thank you so much for joining Satin Ice and me today for this class. So we were using the royal icing and the food color gels. And other than that, that's pretty much all you need in terms of, specialty items. Like you just have to bake up cookies, you have a toothpick and some piping bags. But yeah, with this alone, you can make such a dynamic range of cookies. All right, happy holidays, everybody.
Hey, just
Okay.
a few more questions popped up.
Oh yeah, sure.
So do you dilute the royal icing with water before flooding?
Yes. So if you're going to make like flooding consistency icing, so I'll just, well, if you guys have a few minutes, is it okay if I just demonstrate, I guess? So let me just grab one more cup. Yeah, so you're just going to be using water. You really don't want to use anything else because this is, yeah, water is the best thing to use for this. When you're thinning it out. So if I grab this, you'll see how thick it is. And you kind of know by doing a test of how it settles on itself. So here we have the icing straight from the container. This is a really thick consistency. You can use this to pipe your outline. But you'll see that if I lift my spatula, none of it's coming back down. So it's quite thick. You could probably even pipe flowers with it. But as we start adding a little bit of water, and not too much, just a little bit at a time, give it a mix. Oops. You'll start seeing that it starts to pull. And as you pull the frosting up, take a look at the bottom of the cup, like that will start settling on itself. And depending on how thick you want it, if you want like a 7-second icing or a 5-second icing, that's just referring to how many seconds it takes for these lines to smooth out to the rest of the icing. So again, this is like really loose, so you could use this as your flood. But before when it was thick, you can use that as your outline. But yeah, so you just want to adjust it with water. And if you went too far and you put too much water, you could add just more powdered sugar to it, and that'll stiffen it up right for you. All right, hope that helps.
One last question. Liz, how many cookies would you say that you could cover with a container of our royal icing?
This, oh wow. I guess for cookies that are about this size, like it's maybe like the palm of my hands. My hands are small, so like a normal person's palm size. You could probably get like I would say like 36 to 48 is even possible, depending on like if you are using this really thin method of icing. Again, like you're using so little when you're just coating it with this method, or if you're going to dip it, that's, you're using such little. If you're going to outline and flood, you will use quite a bit more. Like the icing will be maybe about like an eighth of an inch thick. So then you'll get much less out of one container. But if you do this thinner method, you can probably get quite a few dozen. I would say, yeah, 36 to 48. But if you do the thicker icing where, it's about an eighth of an inch with the flooding, I would say maybe like 24 to 36, I guess on the smaller range of that. So yeah, it just depends on how you coat your cookies. Yeah, and you can see like these decorations didn't take too much icing at all. Like we had such little to begin with. and we still have like pretty much all of it left, even though I piped everything I needed to. Like you really only need a little. Like this would probably do like 4 more cookies, 4 to 6 more cookies. Yep. Okay. Anyone else have any questions? All right, if not, we'll end this class. But thank you so much for joining Michael, Satin Ice, and I for this Christmas cookie decorating class. I hope you enjoy it and hope you give it a try this holiday. All right, bye.